Morning, happy Monday. If there's anybody out there, please let me know if the music is too loud or too quiet, and if my voice is too loud or too quiet, if you can hear me, and I can make adjustments. We are continuing on, I think, day 10 now of building this Twitter clone. We built it out once, so here was the initial version that we did. Here's real live Twitter, and then here's our original version. And then I wanted to explore the minimal class CSS approach. So that's where we've kind of been restructuring this here, and we've gotten the center done, the left column mostly done, the right column mostly done. And so there's a few changes that I might want to make of things. One thing, on real Twitter, these icons only expand to the width of the element, and on our original version we had that same thing, and on our new version they kind of go to the full width. So I think I want to fix that at some point, but for now it's not a major thing. And so the other problem that we ran into last time, or challenge that we ran into, was with trying to do the minimal class CSS, I end up using a whole lot of these, like first div, first child, last child. And as I kind of went through and played around with it, it's possible to do, but it's not, I don't think it's the best idea. I think in this case here, once we get into this granular, smaller stuff, it does make more sense to put classes on things, because so this here is a specific to a tweet. So if we go down to our tweets, we've cleaned up the markup quite a bit, which is nice. But essentially, so our tweets, we have our section which is tweet, and then an article which would be one tweet. And then we basically have a div, and inside there the first div contains the image, the second div contains the text, which is a header, a div, and a footer. And then we had to do something a little bit different for this show thread here. So that's the two different sort of states that exist for a tweet. One that has a show thread below it and one that doesn't. And so these images should be different. This image should be the same as this image, so that's a minor thing. We will need to put the line between these eventually, but we'll do that afterwards. So looks-wise, it's looking pretty good. Everything seems to function correctly. I think I can probably actually do that with CSS so that this... I could do that. It would be a simulated. I'd probably want to also be disabled as well, but... Good morning, Tim. How are you doing? So I think I'll start with just showing a little bit of what the issues are with these descendant selectors here. So I think that'll make it a little bit more clear. So I'm just going to create a new folder, and we'll call this demos maybe. And you're well? That's good. Yeah, thanks. I'm well as well. We're just in the last 3 days or so of being in this space here, and then we're going on to we're gonna go help out for the retreat at the yoga center. They're doing an online retreat this year, so we'll be helping out with that on the land, and then from there we head back towards Alberta. So packing and sorting and purging and seeing people before we head out? How about you? What have you been up to? So in demos, I'm going to just put a selectors folder, and then in there we'll have an index.html, and I'll just do everything in line with there. So we'll just create this, and then this will be a selectors demo, just so that we have this for reference. And for anybody who's watching who is interested in the code and wants to follow along, there's the repository, and everything that we do today will be pushed up to there, so you'll be able to take a look at this. Airdrie, but Calgary area, yeah. About 20 minutes north of Calgary. I'm not sure if you've been to Airdrie. Moving back into my condo, my tenants that I had renting it moved out. They bought a house, so Crystal and I are gonna go live there for a little bit. So we have our section, which the name is tweets, which is what we had done, and then we had an article. And my thinking was each article would end up being a tweet, so that way we don't have to do sort of, here's the kind of comparison. A standard way we would do this: class equals tweets, and then this would be class equals tweet. And so this might be like a BEM, BEM methodology, which is the block element model. And then here is going to be our minimal class CSS. Just starting to look for work. If we come through Cranbrook, we might be coming through Cranbrook actually. I think we are, but we're not quite sure exactly days and times and specifics. But yeah, I'll keep you posted for sure. We're going to spend a couple days in Nelson, and then we'll be passing on through there. What kind of work are you looking for? Whatever you can find. So then I'm not going to go as detailed as sort of these tweets are, but let's just take a look at a tweet and see what pieces we want to pull out. So there is an image on the left, and then there's a section on the right. So that we'll need to put in there. So with the minimal class approach, I might do something like this, and then the image. I'm just going to grab this. And then in here, and in the BEM model, I would do class equals tweet underscore image. So that defines this as a element of image inside the tweet block. And then we have another div beside it, and same with here. And then this one I might call the tweet content. And then we've got that show more thread, and that's where it gets a little bit tricky, because if we want these two to be display flex and then or beside each other, and then we want the other one below it to be expanded all the way, we could do it as a grid. Let's do it as a grid. That might be a better option in this case. So in here I'm going to put class equals tweet more. And in here we're going to end up having Actually, you know what? I think I'm going to, this will make more sense as I do it. I'm going to put these two here into their own container. So this is where you end up getting into massive divs, which is part of the idea to try to limit that, but it's unavoidable to some degree. The whole once we get in past the initial like sections and articles, it pretty much makes sense that you're going to be wrapping things in divs. But we can take a look at the minimal class when we build this out again to see how we may be able to limit these. Yeah, Nelson's good. Yeah, I like Nelson. Yeah, I can't really be too picky now. Yeah. Is there much going on in Cranbrook these days? So then in here, actually, so the reason that I would do this is because these two follow kind of the same format. So if we take a look, there's an image, there's two kind of columns, there's an image and then a content section, and then the same thing down here, there's an image and then a content section. So these two follow the same format. So the reason I would want to do that is then I can give this, say, a class of I'll call it split. I'm just going to call this a tweet split because it's not a block or an element, it's more just a defining layout sort of thing. So same thing, this will be the tweet more, but it's also going to have tweet split, so that then I can do this. And now here's where it gets a little bit, the block element model gets a little bit confusing, because we were inside the tweet more block, and then this is actually the tweet more image. And then we will have our sort of, let's just make it the same syntax here, tweet more dash content. And so we could, I think we can get away with it because we are still in the tweet. It is still going to be the same, but it's within this tweet more. So let's just, for simplicity, let's for now keep it the same. So we're essentially either having, if it was a standard tweet without this, this can actually just be wiped out and it'll all stand alone. So that's how we can have it either show or hide that tweet split. So then in here we're going to have our anchor of show more. And then our tweet content, I'm not going to build out sort of this whole thing, but let's just have, we do have these 4 buttons. We've got kind of header, icon, text. I'm really just wanting to do this to show the different methodologies and to practice with this, I guess. A bit, yes, I saw an ad for moving furniture and such, so that's my ideal job to get hired at so far. Cool. Yeah, furniture moving's not a bad gig. Hard on the body for sure, but keeps you fit. Still interested in the coding course you mentioned, and you plan to do that? Yeah, so I'm going to, once I get this Twitter kind of created, I'm going through some kind of a refactoring. So you weren't here for parts of it here. So we got to this stage here where everything's kind of built and looks pretty much the same as regular Twitter. And then I started doing some refactoring to just clean up the code. So one of the things that I'm working on right now is a minimal class CSS, which is the idea is that so code gets kind of messy when you start to, looking good, thank you. When you start to get big things like this, so there's so many classes, when you start to put those block element model syntax into there, the code just starts to get pretty big. Same with the style sheets. And so this minimal class CSS approach is a concept of, rather than giving everything classes, we try to use the syntax, the semantic elements to style it specifically. So if you'll see now our index from the current version, it's just it looks a lot cleaner versus this. It may not look super extra clean to you if you haven't looked at code a whole lot, but I find it a lot cleaner myself personally. But then we run into some problems, so that's where I'm kind of just demoing that here. The problems or the challenges of the things that you solve using this method that don't quite work in this method, or that make it challenging in this method. So I'm just kind of scaffolding out a couple tweet examples so that I can demonstrate what those challenges are, so that then when I go back into the code, I'll apply what we've learned here. But then my ultimate goal is, once we get this whole thing built, is I'm going to do sort of I don't know how long it'll take, 2 or 3 hour short course, a free course of how to build this, but it'll be, rather than sort of 2 hours figuring things out stream, it'll be dedicated, here's how to build this step by step. And that'll be a first sort of free course that'll be available once I get that finished. And then from there I'll start working on the more structured course. So our tweet content, I am going to give it a header, and I will give it a div, which will be content, and then I'll give it a footer. Now, if we were following BEM, we would probably, well, we don't have to give it these. And then this will be our buttons. And I'm not going to put in the icons or anything like that. I'm just going to say A, B, C, D. And then in our header, we've got sort of that first span. Oh yeah, this was the demo. So this is my minimal class CSS framework that I built just for a simple blog post. But basically there's almost no classes in here. It's completely styled. You can create all these different things just by doing basic HTML and using this. And within here you can switch it to a right sidebar. You can go no sidebar. You can go full width. And then there's dark mode. And so if you know how to write basic HTML, you could literally drop this style sheet into here and everything would be formatted for you in this way. Hey there, Terang Dev. How are you doing today? What do the rupees do? So Terang just highlighted a message. That's one of the things that you can do. So we got the affiliate status, which means we can start to add different things. So you can start to collect those little rupee points. I haven't played around, that's the channel points. So basically the more that you watch, the more channel points you get. And I haven't played around with kind of the offerings of that yet. I think I'll spend a bit of time on that soon. the things that you can get. Right now you can do things like the highlight your message, which the Terang dev just did there. A lot of streamers will add like a hydrate, so you can redeem it and then I'll have to drink some water, or there's all kinds of different fun things that we can do with it. If you have any suggestions for what the points could be used for, they're literally just like the points in Whose Line Is It Anyway. They don't really mean anything, they're just for fun. Although they can mean stuff, because as we grow the channel, what some people are doing is offering like the little avatars, the screen avatars. You can buy like items and things like that for them. So that would be something that I might do eventually. You're doing great, Terang. Last Monday you had some net issues. Couldn't catch you, no worries, yeah. Hopefully that's all sorted out for you there. I'm going to be so Wednesday I'm going to stream, and then the week after that I won't be streaming because I'm going to be moving across the country, so, well, at least 15 hours away. But I'm glad you could make it here this week, Turner. So yeah, I'm just going to, what did we have in there? So there's like the retweeted, the name, and this. So yeah, so this will be a good thing to demonstrate this. So John Doe retweeted, and I'm not going to worry about icons or anything like that. And then inside of our header, we've got another span, which is the person's name. Yeah, so Jesse J. Burton. And then we have another span, which is the @ Burton Media, and then the time, and those can be in the same div because they're the same styling. I'm not going to worry about the arrow. And then this will just be a standard paragraph inside of here. So this would be just person's content. So we'll just throw some lorem ipsum into there. Does the rupees help me? Not specifically. I mean, it makes it more fun for the channel. So I don't think there's any monetization of the rupees at all. They're just for fun. The bits, if you're to cheer bits, I believe that is kind of like a donation to me. So you can buy bits and then you can cheer those bits in the chat. And then I get a bit of the revenue from that. They're just for fun now. For now, yeah, just for fun for now. I think that you can do different things. It's like some people do different things where like you can win prizes and things like that, or yeah, I don't know. For now, we're just having fun with it and growing the channel and seeing what we can do with it. Currently, the best way that you can support the channel or support this work is to share it around. I'm working on releasing my new website. Actually, I can show you guys. Actually, I don't. Yeah, I'll show it later. I'll show it a little bit later. I've started working on building a new website out for my Burton Media website that includes more information about the Twitch stream and different projects that I'm working on. So I'll be putting it up later this week, but it's almost actually I'll probably be working on it on Wednesday night. So if you're around Wednesday evening, I'll also be working on that site there. Actually, you know what? I'm gonna do it. I'll show you. No, I don't want the React one, but that's okay. Here. And so this website that I'm showing now is just vanilla JavaScript, plain HTML and CSS. I've been back and forth around doing it in sort of Gatsby or React or all these things, and there's some great functionality for it, but I'm simply just doing an informational website, and so it's actually a lot faster than putting it into a framework, and because it's just going to be informational and I don't need a whole lot of transactional stuff, I felt doing just a standard HTML, JavaScript, CSS would be the way to go for this particular situation. Go here. So the familiar intro, and then I've got the Twitch section. We can view the details, and then just some of my clients, and then I'm working on another panel that actually shows specifics about each of the projects that I'm working on. Newsletter sign up, and then in the footer a little Easter egg here so that you guys will be some of the only people that know is this little guy here blinking. If you hold down on your mouse, there's no indication, but if you hold down he'll grow and then he'll turn into color, and then you can click on him and make him do different things. He'll sit, he'll just stand there and blink in kind of an idle pose, or you can make him run. And then again, if you hold on it when he's in color, eventually he'll pop back down to black and white. So I'm working on, that's the other reason that I wanted to do this site in just plain HTML, JavaScript, and CSS, is because it makes it a lot easier to do these sort of fun things. It gets rid of all that bloated framework stuff that's really designed for complex applications or to support in those, and just takes it down to the bare bones, which makes it so much easier to play with these types of things. So that'll be launching later this week. Maybe Twitch tailored it in such a way, like more redeeming, climbing up the recommendation list. Yeah, I think that's very possible. I think that there might be some kind of connection to the amount of channel points, because I know that they look at the analytics of the channels and that kind of helps. It's very possible. Let's go back to Twitter. And so I am going to open with live server, and these are both going to be, actually they probably will still continue to work soon once live server starts. So here's where we're at, and then what we're building here is in the demos selectors. So demos selectors, and obviously it's just going to look all wonky. And here that's our pre-refactoring. Here's our selectors. So we've got a section, we've got these two tweets in there, and they're both within article tags. Oh, I see. Yeah, okay. That's fine. We'll do separate sections for each one so that way we're styling them separately. I'm just going to make this paragraph a little bit shorter because that's okay. And so here we are pretty complete with what we need for the classes. So now let's just put this same stuff up into the minimal class CSS. So we still need our image in here. I'm still going to do that same thing where we want to wrap this in a div, because we want to be able to have the show more down here. Inside here, we're going to have our header, a div, and a footer. And I think for now we're okay without classes in there. Then we're going to need this again, and then another div with our show more. And something we'll need in here, we've got our tweet content, so this is going to be, so even in here I wouldn't probably give this because I know that it's the header within a tweet content, so we already know that, but these ones here I'm going to need to give some classes. So this is going to be tweet content retweet, and then we'll have tweet content name, and then, and so here's, I think what I'm gonna need to do is do this. I don't know about the validity of putting a span within a span. I think it's okay. So I think that's the same as putting a div within a div, so I think we'll be okay in there. And that way we don't have to, because otherwise we'd have to give this a class as well separately, but this way we can style this based on this and a span within that class. So I think that's good for the header. I don't think we need anything in there, and I don't think we need anything in there because it's pretty standard. So now if we were doing this the minimal class way here, the only thing that I'm gonna do is the same thing. I'm gonna move this into here. And actually the other way, let's do it this way instead, because this part is actually bold, and that way we can actually take this out of this span, and then we can just do that. So that'll make that a bit cleaner. So right away you can see the difference in this with all these classes, how big that is versus this, which is obviously a lot cleaner. But now we'll start to get into some of the pitfalls of this. So let's style up these here, and I'm just going to do everything right in the same file. So we can style the sections. Let's just give some resets first. So we will do margin 0, padding 0, box sizing, border box. We'll just do like that. Yeah, just a simple reset. So let's make our sections. So the sections are going to be the same. If we were doing it in the minimal class, we'd want to do the name equals tweets. In the class-based, we're doing tweets. So let's do the same thing. Let's do BEM. And we're just using CSS, so we can't do nesting in here, so this is standard CSS. So in BEM we would do tweets, and let's just, for the sake of making it, give it some space, we'll just give it 50 pixels of padding, and I think that's good. And the one class that'll be kind of shared, might be a couple, but is this rounded image. So I'm just going to grab that from our styles. and obviously we'll have to adjust this. So this nesting, the way that this we do this nesting with the and :hover, that's saying if you're hovering over a rounded image, an object with a class of rounded image, then do this. Then that's Sass. But if we're doing it in CSS only, we need to take that nesting out. So this here, when you compile the Sass down, actually will compile to this. And a max width 5. Hey Nate, how's it going? I'm doing good, just teaching some style, some CSS. So we're looking at 2 different formats. So this is, as I think you've seen some of the project, we had taken sort of this Twitter, we built out the full thing, and then in the last week we've been working on this minimal class CSS approach, which is just a more streamlined version of writing your CSS, a modern way of doing it, your styles, CSS cascading style sheets. But last week on the stream when I was going through here, I actually found some pitfalls that made it challenging to do that. So now I'm kind of going in and analyzing these pitfalls to kind of demonstrate why they're pitfalls and what we can do to get around them. Someone in the chat needs help? Or is this YouTube content? Kind of the teaching, yeah. So I think that's kind of my goal with this stream, is to teach the web development. Ideally, what I'm doing is essentially I'm live streaming the process of creating tutorial videos. So this is day 10 of creating this more streamlined code. I'm trying to get the code to as good as I would probably want to ship it at, and then basically I'll take all of those videos and take the code and I'll create like a 2 or 3 hour video of just going through directly of here's everything that I learned, here's how I built it, and showing that, and then that'll be released on YouTube. And that way, it was interesting, I saw there's a streamer, yeah, cool man, definitely check it out. There's a YouTube coder that I follow called DevEd, and he had tweeted something about how like I think it was him, some follower was upset because he found out that his live coding, he actually like spent time preparing for his live coding, that his live coding, or not even his live coding, his YouTube videos, tutorial videos weren't just 25 minutes worth of work, that he actually put a ton of time in beforehand to create this 25-minute YouTube video. And this guy kind of said that he like lost respect for him, and then he was pointing out how there's not very many YouTube videos that don't have a ton of work behind them, obviously, right? So this is kind of like, this is day 10 streaming of 2 hours to create this code, and then once I get it to where I like it, then I'll show how I've created it. But the whole process is available on YouTube as well. So it's a good archive. And then I'm doing that and then preparing for my move next week. Yeah, totally. So next week I won't be streaming, but I'll be camping across the country. Cool, sounds good. And I could go for some coffee right now. Okay, so yeah, so we've added this rounded image, and so this is how you would write that same thing in CSS, and we're giving it a border radius of 50% so that it's a circle, overflow hidden so the image doesn't show outside of the container, object fit contain so it takes the image and it shrinks it to the container. We have a maximum width of 5 rem, which, because that's the other reset that I need to do. If I want it to be like this, I can do font size 62.5%, and then I can do body font size of 16 pixels. no, 1.6 rem. So what that's doing is just a rem is a unit relative to the size of the font of the HTML element. So everything's always wrapped in an HTML element. At the very top here, your whole document's always wrapped in an HTML element. The default browser on most browsers is 16 pixels. So by setting font size to 62.5%, 62.5% is 62.5% of 16 pixels is 10 pixels. So what this does is it basically says the HTML font size is 10 pixels, so a rem is a relative unit of 10 pixels instead of 16 pixels, which just makes it way easier to calculate. So I can say font size 1.6 rem, that's 16 pixels. And the reason that I would want to do that is so that rather than using pixels, is that relative units are relative specifically, obviously. So if I change my font size or if I do my scaling, it will also adjust accordingly. So the other thing that I can do for mobile, this helps really good for mobile. So a very simple way to make your site more mobile friendly. Pixels, thank you for the follow. Welcome to the stream. Nice to see you here. Feel free to ask any questions or join in on the conversation or sit back and enjoy. I hope you're doing well. So I could do a media query here. Max width, say 500 pixels. And then I could set the font size to 50%. And that will relatively scale everything that you've used rem units down to this 50%, which would be like setting it to like 8 pixels or something like that. So everything that you've used rem units, even if it's your sizing, your spacing, your padding, margin, will all scale just with that one line of code. So that's a technique that I use for mobile styling that has been really helpful. So there's our shared images, so let's take a look. So at least these are good now. So just to get us started, I'm going to create the section for our minimal CSS, class CSS. And sometimes it's referred to as classless CSS, but the more that I've delved into it, it is really minimal class because you can't get away from classes. At least I haven't discovered a way to get away from classes completely. Thanks, man. I was lurking for like 10 minutes, and the way you explained your code is amazing. Oh, thank you, brother. Thank you, friend. Super informative for someone learning web dev like you. Yeah, awesome. I'm glad you enjoy it. That's kind of what my hope is for it. So yeah, feel free to ask any questions and I can go into more detail on different things. What does your journey so far on web dev look like? So the only thing I want to do in here for now is actually just reference this, and we'll say name equals tweets. And so this is one thing that just doing this section .tweets, you can do the class or the name. I kind of like using the name because it just references it better. Obviously, it's giving it a name for that section. So that's kind of a cheating way around not using a class in some ways, but I think it's, to me, it feels like a better way to reference it. So I'm going to do the same thing. We'll give it, actually, so here's something that I can share. So let's just give these a background color of red and a background color of blue. So if we take a look at this, now we've got our two different sections. And as you can see, there's padding above this, so there's 50 pixels of padding all the way around the entire thing, and same with this one, 50 pixels of padding all the way around. The way padding works is if you've got this container and you give it padding, that's, you can do, I could do 50 pixels and 100 pixels, and that's going to be 50 on the top and bottom and 100 on the left and right. So we can see the difference there. Now there's 100 on the left and the right and 50 on the top. But if you just have one value, it goes all the way around. And so the difference between the margin and the padding, or this is one of the differences anyway, if I set margin, you have what's called collapsing margins. So margin doesn't expand the background color, so let's, just so that we can see what's going on, let's give it a border 1 pixel solid red. So the border, that's right, okay, yeah, that's not gonna work. Let's give it a red and blue on this one, and I'm gonna give it like 5 pixels so we can see it. And what you'll see is that the border is around the content, and then the margin is actually around that. So that's one difference between margin and padding, is that the padding is on the inside of the container and the margin is on the outside of the container. So we can see our border there to reference that. And the other thing that you'll notice is that there's actually only 50 pixels between these two. So if I was to change these to padding, or even just the top one to padding, you'll see now there's 50 pixels below and 50 pixels of margin. Whereas when it's just margin, there's only 50 pixels between the two of them. And that's what collapsing margins is. So padding stacks, it'll add, so if there's 50 pixels of padding beside 50 pixels of padding, it'll have 100 pixels of padding. If you have margin above and below, the margins will collapse so that there's only 50 pixels between the two of them. Does that make sense? I started last October and stopped around December. I started to study again around late May. So far I'm comfortable with HTML and CSS, and now I'm learning JavaScript. Awesome, that's a great way to do it. And the more that you know about HTML and CSS, the more powerful JavaScript becomes, because at the end of the day, that's what you're doing with the JavaScript, is manipulating the HTML and CSS. So I think that's a really great way to learn. And I've been doing this for professionally for 14 years. I've been playing with code for about 20 years. And I still love exploring the basics. That's part of why I love doing this stream too, is just looking at the basics. The basics are where the meat and the potatoes are of all the coding development fun. You're back, Nate? Welcome back. No worries at all. You're in the middle of a story about your move. Oh, yeah, no worries. So we're packing up through the week here. We'll be going over to the yoga center here and helping out with a retreat that they're doing. I'm doing some IT support for them. And that'll be, my wife and I will both be there, sort of hanging out and having fun and connecting with people there, supporting. And then we hit the road and go on a week-long camping adventure. So no stream next week. So I'll be on the road. I'll be in the middle of nowhere. So yeah, that's my margins and padding. So I'm just going to switch this back to padding. Oops, not padding left. I want padding all the way around, just to give us space, because we're not worried too much about how far apart or what they look like. It's just to differentiate between the two. So that gives us here. So then within each of these, we have an article. and the article is a specific tweet. And so using the BEM methodology, we would give the article a class of tweet because that's the block. Using the minimal class CSS, we won't, because we'll just reference it within the section. So in here, we're going to have section div.tweet. And in here, we can just say section article. And this is actually article.tweet. And I'm just going to give this a max width of, let's say, 50 viewpoints. And we will give this a background color of, we won't use, I'm just going to give, let's do like, we just want a super light gray, something like that. Oh yeah, and I didn't give the maximum width on there. So oh, I did give it on there. It's just not working. But this we actually want down here, and that's why. You miss camping? Yeah. And hiking in general, yeah. That's one of the things when we go back to Alberta, that it's we're closer to the mountains, so I'm looking forward to getting some time back out in the mountains. I mean, we have a mountain here on the island that we're at, but it's not the same as the big mountains in Alberta, for sure. Okay, so let's do the BEM first, and then we'll do the classless CSS. So with BEM, we've then got this tweet split, and this tweet split is here and it's also down here, and what that's basically for is so that we can flex these left and right and have a specific split between those two. So let's do, and so if we're doing this properly, I would do it like this, dot tweet. Actually, we don't need to do that. We just need to do dot tweet, and it is an article. Split. And we'll display that flex. We'll align the items, flex start, and that's our minimal class. So in here we basically then we have a tweet image and tweet image. So that's how we can give it the proper width. So within here, that's all we need is just to display those flux for now. Article dot tweet dot tweet image article. We're going to give this a width of, say, 100 pixels. And we'll text align center, because the only thing that's ever going to be in there ideally is that image, or there's a line that goes between them. And so we're just styling the bottom one here for now. So one of the things that I might do is, if I was doing something like this, so there's two different ways you can do this. You can put padding all the way around it, because that would give you extra space there, or you can put the padding inside of each element. And there's pros and cons to both. If you put padding around the outside, it means if you do want something to get to the edge, you can't. So I typically will try to put the padding on the inner elements. Does that make sense? See how if I wanted this to touch the top and I had padding on the outer element, then I can't. I'd have to remove the padding from the outer element. So if I just make each element kind of its own sizing and add the padding on the inside stuff, then it makes it easier to reach the container if you want to. So this is a little bit big. Our max width on the image was 50 pixels, I believe. Yeah, so 5 rem. So let's actually make this, we want, say, maybe 10 pixels on each side, so we'll say 7 rem. And then our image will actually just put some padding top of, say, 1 rem. I think we want a bit more space than that. So let's actually make this 8 rem, and our padding top will do 1.5 rem. No, that's a bit better. Then we have our, and just so that we're only styling this bottom one right now. Got to mute for a bit. Take care of calling the unemployment office. Cool, good luck. I'll unmute if I'm on a long wait to hold. Yeah, cool, man. Good luck with your call and getting that support in that way. That's minimal. Bam. Okay. So we have a rounded image, we've got our tweet image, now we've got our tweet content. So the tweet content contains all of the rest of the stuff, which is all of this stuff here. So we can actually give our spacing right on that one. Whoops. So in here we do the same article, tweet, article, tweet, tweet. So this is where Sass is handy too, because then you don't have to put in these article.tweet. Technically you don't, you can just say tweet image, but if you happen to have a tweet underscore image somewhere else in your site or tweet content, it's unlikely as long as you're following a pretty good practice, but this just ensures that it's only the tweet content within the tweet. Whereas if I was doing this with Sass, I could just have this article tweet, and then I could put this inside of here and it'll automatically compile it down to this, like we had seen with that rounded image there. But for the sake of simplicity, we'll just do the CSS. And this is something too, like it's really good for pixels, learning the HTML and CSS. Learning CSS and understanding it really well is a really good way to then explore Sass, because Sass can be a little bit confusing if you aren't familiar with the CSS. You gonna head out, Tim? Just take care. Good luck with the move. Yeah, thanks a lot, man. Should be good. I think we're all pretty ready for it and gonna move on. So yeah, thanks a lot. It was nice to connect with you again. Maybe see you Wednesday night. If not, then I'll catch you on the other side of the move, or I'll see you in Cranbrook. Take care, man. So our tweet content, I'm just going to give the 1.5 rem and then 0 on the left and right, because we'll leave that. Actually, you know what? I'm going to give 1.5 rem, 1.5 rem, 1.5 rem, and 0. And that is top, right, bottom, left. And that's so that we've got spacing on this side, spacing on this side, spacing on this side, but we don't want to add extra spacing on this side because we've already got it within this one here. So this here is exactly the same as going top 1.5 rem, right, bottom, left. So those two are exactly the same. And I'll leave that in there. So if, so for anybody out there, Pixels or anyone, this is the Git repo for this particular project. So if you're interested in taking a look at the code, it's all available there. And after every stream, I push up to that repository. I also, it's a bit long, obviously. It's not, like I say, once I get the code exactly the way that I want it, I'm going to do a short video of, a shorter video of how it all ends up in the end. But if you are interested, this here is the playlist of all the streams up to date of how we got to basically not even this one. We did get all the way even to pre-refactor. What is it called? Pre-refactoring. Oh, yeah. So we did get to here. So this is obviously real Twitter, and then we got to this. So in the first 6 or 7 days, we got to where we had these so that you can follow, you can unfollow, all that kind of stuff. And that's using some JavaScript. So we did even get into some JavaScript on there too, Pixels, if you're interested in going deeper on that. So that just gives us some space there. And then we have our tweet content retweet and tweet content name. Article.tweet content retweet. And then this one is going to be a color of a little bit darker gray. And that's this one here. And so actually the background is white until we hover over it, and then it has that lighter. So let's just do that actually. So our section article hover, we'll have this background, and I think we need to go with an even lighter. It's amazing how subtle of a gray is needed to be behind text. Oh, as I did it on the article tweets. We need to do this. Article dot tweet hover, and we'll get rid of this. There, that looks good. And then we need a way darker gray for the And now just take a look. So actually the image is quite a bit further down, so let's just move that quite a bit more. And that is our tweet image. Padding top, let's say 2.5 rem. So 25 pixels. We have this, and now if we take a look at the finished one, this retweeted thing actually gets bumped back a little bit. So we can do that with transform, translate x minus 1 rem. So we'll move it back 10, or let's do 5 rem. The other thing is that this font size is a little bit smaller, so I'm just going to make it 0.9 em. And so an M is relative to the current font size. So a rem is relative to the HTML elements font size. M is relative to the current font size. So this is basically saying 0.9, 90% in a way of the current font size of that element. I also want, because it's a span, by default it's display inline block, but we actually want this to be display block, so that then instead of having the text right beside it, it's actually up above. It's on its own line. So now this element takes up the space of the whole line. And we can see how it's moved back into the left. So I think that is a little bit too much though. And I do want to add just a little bit more padding to the top. So yeah, so now we're kind of lined up a little bit more there, and this a little bit back. And again, this is just for demonstrating the difference between those two, so I'm not going to spend a ton of time actually like worrying about fonts and display and stuff like that. I'm really just wanting to get to where we see the difference between here's BEM and how it looks with all these classes versus the minimal class CSS approach, and then some of the pitfalls that come up with that approach. So let's move on. The content name. We've got the name, and then here, and I think, yeah, what we did up above is what I'll do here as well. I'm going to, instead of doing it this way, we'll actually put this in a strong tag, and then this will be just like that. So that way we don't have to wrap them both. But essentially that means we'll style this element for how we want this to look, and then we'll override the stylings of the strong tag. I'm also going to put a bit of space. So here, this is inside of our article tweet, we have our content name. I'm going to just give some margin to the top of like 0.5 rem. Color is going to be just a little bit. Is it the same as that? What does it look like on here? Yeah, those two are the same. So we'll just do that. We'll make it the same color as this. And then I think that's good. But then basically we need to do the strong within there. Its color is going to be just black, and its font, actually it's probably got the default strong. Yeah, so that works. The margin top is not working, so I'm actually going to do padding top, and that's not working either. Interesting. So if I now make this display block, now it looks like it's working. So let's give it a bit more to just double check. Yeah, there we go. So because it's display inline block, it doesn't actually have space, it doesn't take up space. So we need to make it display block so that it does take up space. So there we go, and then I'm just going to sort of duplicate this, and instead we're going to, did we put something in there? It's just a div, so inside a tweet content, a paragraph. So it'll be the only paragraph, so I can probably just do this tweet content paragraph, and we'll do the same here. We'll do a margin of 1.5 rem 0 on the right and left, and then we've got our footer article dot tweet content footer, and it's just going to be display flex, align item center, and justify content space between, so that'll push them all kind of out. And we will give some padding on the top and none on the right and left. And we want it to be width 100% so that it expands out. And that's not showing up there. So our footer, because the anchors don't actually, because anchors are display inline, so it's the same kind of thing that we've been seeing here a few times. Tweet content, an anchor inside the footer. We want to display, or by default they're display inline. You need to do display block or display inline block. Okay. Inline block. Interesting. Okay, so our footer here. Oh, so those styles are not being applied to it. So we've got a mismatch. Let's actually cancel, let's comment this out and see. So where are we missing? Maybe the footer isn't in the tweet content. That's probably it. Yeah, it is. Oh no, it is. Tweet content, header, div, footer. So we should be referencing it. Tweet content, missing an underscore. So now let's take a look. There we go, that's what we were looking for. So now they're split apart like that, so similar to what we have here. And like I said, this is just for demo purposes, so I'm not worried about what the content is. So we didn't need to make them, I didn't think it needed to, but there we go. So then we've basically got, so a rounded image, but we've got a rounded image inside of our tweet more. So now we're just kind of styling our tweet more. Let's do article, tweet more. And we'll do our dot rounded image, and in here we'll actually say max width of 4 rem and see if that takes place. Yeah, so that works. So we're shrinking this one, and the reason that this works is because we do have our rounded image saying max width is 5 here, but because this is more specific, so we're more specifically saying, because we're saying the rounded image that's inside of a tweet more class that's inside of a tweet that's an article. Whereas if we just did this, they're going to be the same because the cascade works. So now, because 5 rem takes place, rounded image takes place after this, the last one will take precedent. but if we become more specific with it, it will take effect with this one here. So we're good there. That gives us that, and then we've just got our show more, and then even our tweet more itself has a hover, and it'll have a background color of a little bit darker. Actually, I'll probably just grab the color of our and then we just need to know what that last one is. Tweet more content. Okay. Yeah, so there's something we might want to do. So we've got tweet content within that tweet split on both of these here. So what we could do is put our padding top and bottom on tweet content, which would then apply to both these sections. But I think I'll just leave that. I would like, though, we see how these are kind of in line. So what we can do with that is our tweet more. So we have our tweet split, which all it does is display flex. But if we do article.tweet, no, I already had that on there. So tweet more, we can add stuff, so it's already display flex, but we can say align items center. And what that should do, no, because our image has some padding on it. So here's an example of, so we've got all that padding on there because we basically said the tweet image has the padding, but it's getting it from this article tweet image. We actually don't want it to give that on the bottom one here. We just want it on the first one. So a couple of ways that we can do that. Let's take a look at our markup here. So basically we've got our split image and then we've got our tweet image, and we've got styling saying that the tweet image within a tweet is has padding top. So the easiest way is we don't want to have that if it's inside the tweet more. So what I would probably do for this is where we've got our tweet image, the width and the text align center is fine, but now we want to only have it for, we don't want to have it for the now let's override it. So here's two ways we can do it. We could do not tweet more, and we can take this and move it into there. I think that'll work. Yeah. So now we've got it on the top here, but not on the bottom here. We might want to put our own padding on there, which I think that's what I'm going to do instead. So this is one approach to do it. We can say not the tweet more, but the reason that the pitfall in that would be that then basically if you had other ones that you didn't want to have that, you'd have to add them into here. So not this, not this, not this. So this isn't the ideal way to deal with this. The better way that I would think is just to override it. So when we're doing our styles down here, we've done our rounded image. It's got the max width of 4 rem. Let's just grab the same selector, but this time we're going to say a tweet more tweet image, and we'll say padding top, we'll just give it 1 rem because I think we still want a little bit of space in there. And maybe we'll do the same. We'll do padding 1 rem and 0 so that the top and bottom both have padding, but the left and right don't. There, so that gives us a bit more. Good. Okay, so that's styling the BEM approach. So it's pretty, there's quite a lot in there. This is the BEM approach right here. So now let's try and do the same thing with the minimal class approach. So same thing, we have a section with the name of tweets. Let's see what we can do. What I'm going to do though is I'm just going to move this down below for now. I'll probably put it back afterwards because that way it's the order of the doc. Or maybe I'll just move these. Oh, but then the code is there. Well, this will work for now. We'll reorganize it afterwards. So now we're going to take the same thing. So this is with classes. This is the BEM methodology that we did to style this. Now we're going to do the same styling with this one here using minimal classes. And then I'll show you some of the ways that we can do things to make no classes. So right now we don't have any classes except for our rounded image here, and theoretically we could get away with that, but the reason that I would use a class on this is because we have an image here and an image here that we both want to style the same, and so we would either have to come up with a crazy selector to grab both of these images or give them a class. So this is where I think it starts to come where if you learn a lot about the classless CSS approach, the minimal class, and that's a fairly new approach, is the minimal class CSS. So we're all still kind of learning ways to work with this, but if you understand it more, then you know exactly when to put classes in, because sometimes it doesn't make sense to try and use a selector, and we'll see that as we go through this here. So right now we just have a section with the name of tweets, and then we know that there's articles within that, and those become our tweets. And we can say, and when we hover, they give us this class here. So that's where we're at sort of with this. We got this one up here. And we can start right off the bat where we can say the first div inside of an article we want to be, and so that's where that selector is the first div within inside of an article, actually, article. And I probably do want to do section name equals tweets. And so this is where actually it becomes more important to be specific on here, because if you just said the first div inside of every article, then any article you had on your page that had a div as the first element, this would apply to. So we do want to say just the section with the name tweets and the article div. And again, if you're using Sass, this would be, you wouldn't need to do all of this stuff here because you would be nesting them in and it would parse that out and write it. But this is sort of the way you need to do it if you're writing plain CSS. But it's good to write the plain CSS in order to understand it better. So in here, we're just going to do our display flex. Now this is saying any divs that are the first descendant of an article. So in theory, I believe because in our markup we have our article and we've got this div, and then we've got this div, we want both of those to be flex, and this was our show more there. And so you can see that that's already taken place there. And so what we can do is we can give that a width as well. So that's how we could get away with giving that a width. Oh no, it's the containing. So it's the first one within there that we need to give width. So here's where it gets a little bit. Here's where I would start to use some classes. So this we don't need to put a class on. But if I want the first div inside of there, what I would need to do is say this, and then the first div inside of there, or I could say div first child. I'm going to do it the same way here. Let's do background color red so we can see what we're selecting, and I'm going to give it a width of, I think we went with 8 rem. And text align center. So we're not actually getting, because now both of these divs are getting this applied to it, which isn't what we want, because we're saying any div that is the first descendant of an article, and then any div that is the first descendant of a div inside of there. So basically we've got, this is the one we're trying to target, our image. We want to give it a maximum width. But this is also a direct descendant of this, so we can't do it this way here. We might be able to div colon first child. So if we do that, there we go. So now we're just selecting the first child of that. Now this will work, but the problem with this is that if for some reason we wanted to move this over to the other side, then that wouldn't work, right? If we decided we wanted the images to be on the other side of the text, that's not going to work, because then it's going to be the end one. Yeah, it's going to cause all kinds of problems there. So whoops. So this is where the first child, we can do it this particular, because the markup is there is like this, we could do it like this. But if we wanted to move this div anywhere, that's not going to work. So I'm not really liking the first child approach for this. It's a nice kind of way to do it, to demonstrate the power of CSS, but from a practical sense, I don't think it's going to work. So I'm going to give this a class of we'll just give it a class of tweet image. So I still like the applying BEM. It's still like a good way to name things, I think. But we'll call this tweet image. Theoretically, we could do .image, and as long as we reference it, but the problem is that if there's other things on your site that have a class of image, which is a pretty common word that you might use, they would be applied to this. So being a little bit more specific is typically better. So in this particular case, if we say tweet image here, and we can do the same thing in here, is we'll give this a tweet image. And here's another case. So we know that this image we need to have bigger than this image down here. So one way that we could connect that, let's just see what we're doing here. That's all good. And we do want to I can get rid of the background color, but we'll put a padding of We wanted 3 rem on the top, 0. Yeah, I think we're okay with that. Was it 3? Seems like a lot. Let's do 2.5. But as we know, we want this image here to be smaller. We want this row here, even though it's display flex. So we need to basically target this bottom div. So one way we could do that is we know that we have section name equals tweets, and we have our article div, and actually no, we can do this, so div colon last child, and it will have a background color of red. And so we'll see which one we're selecting there. So it's not working because we're basically saying any div that is the last child within this article. So that's not going to work because this div is actually, or no, this div is the last child, the last div child in an article. It's the last div child of this div, but because we're not specifying the first div, any div that is the last child will be targeted with this selector. So we can say only the descendant selectors, so a div that is basically the within the article, and then the last child of that, and that gets us this one here. So again, here's an example. I might use this. This might not be a bad way to do it. It's just using that last child. The problem is that if you wanted to move this, same thing, you run into the same problem. What might actually make more sense is to make this a footer, because it is kind of a footer. And if we know that it's going to be a footer, then we can call it a footer. Then we just have to be careful though, because if we style a footer within tweets, then this footer is going to get applied. So we only want this one. So what we can do is we can say the footer that is a direct descendant of the article. And that gives us the same thing. But now we don't have that split in there because it's not a div, and we did an article that's a div. So what we could do is say we also want the footer. And there we go. And now we know that this is display flex, so let's just actually move this up here, and we will align these items center and justify. Oh no, we don't need to justify the content, just align them. And now we've got them like this, and we want to shrink this down. So we were applying that to here, our padding and our width, to the first div inside there, but obviously that's not going to work now because it's not just a div, there's also a footer. So we could do that. And so what's that saying is that basically any first descendants of article that have a div called tweet image, apply this to it. So I think that that's valid. I think that'll work. And so we could theoretically do the same here. We could say, if we know that everything in this article is always going to be display flex, we can do the star selector. And that way it's saying anything that's the first element in this, make it flex. So it is really important to kind of know what your markup's going to be for the whole entire thing. I can see some problems in this methodology when you start to add things. You really need to be sure of what you want to add into there. If we know that everything is going to always be those display flexes, this star would probably work fine. If we know that they may change, you might want to do it this way here. But then you start getting into adding classes. So it's a really interesting piece. When do you start to add classes to things versus do it this way here? There's a lot of that in coding where if nothing's ever going to change, there's one way that's really, really good to do it, but almost never do you have something that's never going to change. So you're always basically thinking, okay, I'm going to do it like this because I might want to add stuff to it in the future. At least that's the way that I've always done it, because I'm always thinking about how difficult is it going to be for me to change this when inevitably the client or the person I'm working with wants to change it. And then it's a balancing act of deciding how much time do I spend thinking about how potential changes versus just doing it, because it's not that difficult to change these things. It just means that you're going to maybe create some extra work. So let's stick with the intention of using less classes to make the markup more clear. I think putting a footer in there is a good idea. So let's reference it in that way. And in that case, then what we can do is just use the star here. So this star right now, because we only have a div and a footer in there, is kind of the same as doing this. So that's why this, if we do star, works. So if we want this to be a little bit more reusable, what we can say is, what we could do is do this, even though, likeliness, what you add to this would likely be another div, but if you wanted to add, say, a header, so that's where, right now we don't have this. So let's say we wanted to add a header to this that was just an H1 that says tweet. Nope, not there. Here. If we did star, these styles are going to apply to this, and we might not want this to be styled that way, because we may want, say, section article header. Let's say we want a background color the blue, and we'll make the color white. And we'll say text align center, and we'll give it 0.5 and 0 padding. So this is just for experimental purposes, teaching purposes. So now we've got our header here. Why is it? Oh, so that's interesting. So we only want the header that's the first child of article. Otherwise, we were targeting the header within here. So now we can see we've got our tweet header and it's styled blue. So do you see that difference? So if I don't target it specifically, now this has become blue background as well, not just the top piece. And that's because that is the header of this div. Whereas if we say just a header that is a direct descendant of the article, then we can do it this way. But what happens here, so if we were to apply these as star, then what happens is our top header actually gets displayed flex, and it's going to be, it gets all the styles that are applied to the first element of this, which is not what we want. So it's more important when doing this sort of minimal class CSS to really think about what you might add to your markup. And we will not be having a header, so let's get rid of that. So I hope that makes sense. So now we need to target this footer because we want to have less space, we want to have it hover a different color, we want the image to be smaller. So we can target it directly in here. We've got it here. We've got our line items center. Yeah, I think that's fine. Let's do a hover background color. And what was it, like 686868? And then we also need tweet, or we need to find the rounded image inside of here, and we give it a max width of 4 rem. And then we need to get rid of our padding off of the top and bottom of that, which is done with div dot tweet image padding 1 rem 0. So is our padding coming from which one? Which one is the padding coming from? Yeah, it's definitely coming there. So our tweet image, oh, it's still got something's not. Name equals tweets article footer div dot tweet image. Let's see what we're selecting. Oops. Background color red. See what we're selecting here. So we are getting that. So this must be a cascading thing. So because down below somewhere Yeah, right here. Okay. So the easiest way to solve this would be to take this and move it down here, because we're setting the padding on that to here, so we need to override it here. We do want the 1/8. Yeah, that's perfectly valid. Okay. And so we did give that one class tweet image, but then inside of here we have a span with a strong. Inside of the header we've got our div and we've got our footer. So I think we can do all of those without having to worry about classes. So let's do our section, name equals tweets, article. Now we've got our article, and then basically we have a div and then another div. So here's where actually I'm going to give this a class equals tweet content. Tweet content, just because otherwise trying to select this div that's inside of this div and not affecting any of the other ones is just does not make sense. And yeah, maybe I'll just demonstrate that. So no, what am I doing? So we can select it in this way. So we have a so the div first child, and then div last child, background color red. So let's see if we grab that. So we did get the right one, but this is really complex, like the first child and then the last child. Like, to read this is pretty confusing. So, and it also, like I say, if we move things around, it would also change this. If we all of a sudden wanted to have this on this side, if we wanted to move the image to this side, the styles would all have to be recreated, because we're very specifically saying the first div and then the last div within that div make reference that. So this is a case where I would say it makes way more sense to just add a class for this specific one, and then we can do the same just to make sure we're referencing it, and there we go, we're grabbing the same thing. So, and then within here we've got some pieces. So I am going to just, in this case, give ourselves some padding, 1 rem and 0 in this section. And that gives us a bit of space on the top and bottom. I think I'm going to give these a border just so we can see them better. Border 1 pixel solid. Let's do something like that. And that's the BEM, and then we've got our minimal class. We'll do the same thing, just so we can see. And we got tons of space in there which we could fix, but let's see, we got about 10 minutes left or so. Might go a little bit over today, but that's okay. This is our minimal class, yeah, okay. Tweet content, so we got our tweet content. So then we need to style the header of that content, not the header. And it has a span and another span, so 2 spans. So I'm going to make the spans display blocks. So let's do that first. So each of the spans, we will make them display block. And then we want to do, in this particular case, I will do the first child, because this is pretty obvious that this is always going to be the first thing. It's very specific, the styling of it, so I think I feel pretty comfortable with just referencing first child in there. And we can give our transform translate x -1 rem, and we'll give the color, and this will be our 686868, and then our font size will be our 0.9 M. So again, M is relative to the font size that of the parent, I guess. And let's actually just put the padding on the bottom of this. So 0.5 rem. So 5 pixels of padding below it. Not minus. There. So that does that. We got our strong here already, so we need this to be a different color. So actually, if we take a look at this, all of the span elements we actually want to be this color, except for this, which is the strong. So then we can actually say this, and we override the strong within the span to have color black. Then we have our middle content, but I think I'm going to do the same thing. So in our header, do we reference just the header? No. I want the same thing. So padding, bottom, 0.5 rem. So let's just do that. So we have a bit of space between those ones, and then I'm going to put a padding top on this footer, so that way the paddings are on the elements that are very specific, because the middle content is a div, so it's harder to, I don't want to target divs if I can help it. If you can put all your padding or your layout stuff on the more semantic elements, I think that'll be helpful in keeping things organized here. So we can say the padding top 0.5 rem, and this should give us the space between those elements. Obviously down here we've got some weird spacing things going on, but let's just change this. We'll make it 1, and then our footer is also display flex, align items center, and justify content space between. And I think Okay, so we do actually want padding right, so that's what we did as well. We did that. This is where we did that left, right, so where we did this, we've got top, right, and bottom. We need the same thing. That's why this is up against the side there. So we want all of the tweet content in our class. Let's see it. Minimal class, tweet content. And we did 1.5, so let's just do the same thing. 1.5, 1.5, 1.5, and 0. And let's see how that looks. Looks pretty good. We have a lot more space, obviously, in this one. And why is that? Because we gave a margin on the paragraphs. Okay. And then we've got our spacing around there. So yeah, I like the way, because the footer I added spacing on. So let's just fix that to make these a little bit more consistent. Our footer, let's get rid of the padding on that. There we go. And then we just need the paragraph. We do the same thing, so we just have, whoops, maybe we just need one rem. Yeah, I think that's good. So we need to do the same thing in our tweet content down here. There we go. Okay, so they're pretty close. I think there might be a couple things where I did some spacing a little bit different, but essentially they're kind of the same. Pretty close to the same, but we can take a look now. Here is the markup for the minimal class one. And then here's the markup for the class-based one. So in this particular example, it's not too different. We did pretty good, but that's because I was, theoretically, if I was doing this full BEM, I would make this maybe a div and I would give it a class as well. So like this would actually be div class equals tweet content header. And instead of a footer, this would be class equals tweet content footer. So we'd need to make it a bit more, a few more classes in there. But so we did apply some of that. But if we take a look at the CSS, here's the minimal class CSS. And then here is the class-based. So we got from line 25 to 102, 75 there, and then 104 to 78, so about the same. The other advantage to using the minimal CSS is that it really encourages using these semantic elements, which is really good for accessibility purposes. So that's the other reason that I do kind of like this more classless approach. And naming things is always a pain. Like naming classes, coming up with classes is always going to be a pain. So if I can do this without having to do these tweet content, tweet content name, I kind of like that approach better. And as you can see, if you're getting into the longer side of things, you might, it'll get more and more complex. But yeah, so we didn't do a whole lot of work on the project here, but I think that that's a good review of what we've learned in here, and I'll probably take this back next week and just kind of apply some of that. So having both the approaches in there, because right now what we did was we kind of we tried to go extreme on that, which means we have a whole bunch of these first just childs and selectors and things like that. And I think we'll be thanking ourselves to go back and doing it with a kind of a mixed approach. That's all for today. Thanks everybody for hanging out. I hope you learned something. Feel free to reach out to me on Twitter or Facebook or here on Twitch or wherever you connect. I think most of my links are in the on my Twitch page there. You can also find all my contact info on my website there. And yeah, so next week we'll be on a pause while I go move, so no streaming next week, but we will see you again, if not the following week, which is pretty unlikely actually, so probably we won't have the next 2 Mondays. The week after that, most likely, for sure. Have yourselves a great day, and we will see you next time.